When I came home after spending 3 days at my mother's funeral, my house keys no longer worked. Standing on my own front porch with a suitcase in my hand, I watched my husband smile through the window as a locksmith installed brand new locks. Then he opened the door just long enough to throw my clothes onto the lawn and said, "This isn't your home anymore." He had no idea every deed to that mansion carried only one name, mine. I had just buried my mother. 3 days later, I came home, exhausted, heartbroken, and ready to start healing. But when I tried to unlock my front door, my key didn't fit. My husband had changed every lock while I was gone. He smiled, threw my suitcase onto the lawn, and told me I didn't live there anymore. What he didn't know was that every legal deed to that mansion belonged to me. And in less than 48 hours, his entire life was about to fall apart. Olivia Bennet never imagined that the hardest day of her life would become even worse before the sun had set. 3 days after burying her mother, she drove back to the home she had shared with her husband, Ethan, for nearly 7 years. The long drive felt endless. Her heart was still heavy with grief, and the only thing she wanted was the comfort of her own bed and the familiar walls that had once felt like home. She pulled into the driveway just before sunset, noticing something strange almost immediately. The security gate opened, but the moving truck parked outside caught her attention. Several expensive pieces of furniture were being carried into the house. At first, she assumed Ethan had finally ordered the new furniture they had talked about for months. She even smiled, believing he wanted to surprise her after such a painful week. Carrying her small suitcase, she walked to the front door and slid her key into the lock. It wouldn't turn. She frowned and tried again. Still nothing. Confused, she checked the house number to make sure she hadn't somehow walked to the wrong door. Before she could knock, the front door slowly opened. Ethan stood there wearing perfectly pressed clothes, his arms folded across his chest, showing no sign of sympathy for the woman who had just lost her mother. Standing beside him was a young blonde woman wearing Olivia's silk robe, casually holding a coffee mug as if she belonged there. Olivia froze. For several seconds, nobody spoke. Finally, Ethan stepped outside and quietly closed the door behind him. "We're done, Olivia," he said coldly. "I changed the locks yesterday." Olivia stared at him, unable to process what she had just heard. "What are you talking about?" "I just buried my mother." "I know," he replied without emotion. "That's why I waited until you left." The words hit harder than anything she had ever experienced. She looked past him and noticed framed family photographs had already been removed from the hallway. The home she had spent years decorating no longer looked like hers. Then Ethan reached into the hallway, grabbed her suitcase, and placed it on the front porch. "Take your things and leave." Olivia felt tears filling her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. "You can't throw me out of my own home." Ethan laughed quietly. "You're home," he said. "Everything here belongs to me now." At that exact moment, Olivia remembered something her late mother had whispered only a few days before her death. "Never forget whose name is written on every deed." Those words echoed in her mind as she looked back at the mansion. Ethan believed he had locked her out forever. He had absolutely no idea that, legally, he had just locked himself inside someone else's house. Olivia picked up her suitcase without another word. Every instinct told her to scream, to cry, to demand answers. But years of working as a corporate attorney had taught her one lesson above all else: never make emotional decisions when someone else is counting on them. She walked calmly back to her car while Ethan watched with a satisfied smile. The blonde woman wrapped her arms around him from behind and laughed loud enough for Olivia to hear. "I can't believe she actually left that easily." Ethan smirked. "She doesn't have a choice anymore." Olivia drove away, but not to a hotel. Instead, she headed straight to the downtown office of Harrison and Cole, the law firm that had handled her family's legal affairs for more than 30 years. Senior partner Daniel Harrison looked up in surprise when she walked into his office carrying a suitcase. Olivia, what happened? She quietly placed a folder on his desk containing the original property documents her mother had insisted she keep in a private safe. Daniel carefully reviewed the paperwork before looking back at her with a puzzled expression. Why are you showing me these? My husband changed every lock on the house and threw me out, Olivia replied. Daniel blinked in disbelief. He did what? He believes the mansion belongs to him. Daniel opened another file from the firm's digital archive and compared every page. After only a few minutes, he leaned back in his chair and smiled. This may be one of the biggest mistakes I've seen in 30 years. Olivia frowned. What do you mean? Daniel turned the documents toward her. The mansion was never transferred to Ethan. Olivia stared at the paperwork. Every deed. Every mortgage release. Every property tax record. Every legal document listed only one owner. Olivia Bennett. Daniel continued. When your father passed away, your parents placed the property into a protected family trust. After your mother's death, the trust automatically transferred complete ownership to you. Ethan's name has never appeared on a single legal document. Olivia slowly exhaled. So legally. Daniel smiled. Legally, Ethan just committed an illegal eviction against the owner of the property. Before Olivia could respond, Daniel's assistant hurried into the office holding a tablet. Mr. Harrison, you need to see this. She placed the screen on the desk. Security cameras from Olivia's house showed Ethan and the blonde woman walking through the mansion, laughing while packing Olivia's personal belongings into garbage bags. Then Ethan looked directly into one of the cameras and said with a grin, She'll never step foot in this house again. Daniel looked at Olivia and quietly closed the tablet. Give me 24 hours, he said. When we're finished. He won't be the one deciding who leaves that house. 24 hours later, Olivia stood across the street from the mansion, watching as two sheriff's vehicles slowly pulled into the driveway. She wasn't alone. Daniel Harrison stood beside her, holding a thick folder containing the court's emergency possession order. Ethan had no idea what was about to happen. Inside the house, he and his girlfriend were enjoying breakfast when the loud knock echoed through the front entrance. Ethan opened the door with an annoyed expression. Can I help you? One of the deputies calmly handed him the court documents. Mr. Ethan Carter, you are being served with an emergency eviction order for the unlawful removal. The deputy waited patiently while Ethan stared at the court papers in complete disbelief. His confident smile disappeared almost instantly. There has to be a mistake, he argued. This is my house. Daniel Harrison calmly stepped forward, followed by Olivia. She stood quietly at the end of the driveway, saying nothing. Ethan's face turned pale the moment he saw her. Olivia, what is this? She looked at him without emotion. You told me I'd never step foot in my house again. I thought I'd let the law answer that for me. Daniel handed the deputy the certified property records. Every document carried only one legal owner, Olivia Bennett. Ethan grabbed the papers from the deputy's hands, flipping through page after page with growing panic. He searched desperately for his own name, convinced there had to be a mistake. But it never appeared. The mansion, the land beneath it, and every improvement made over the years had always belonged to Olivia through the Bennett family trust. The deputy calmly explained that Ethan had illegally changed the locks, unlawfully removed the property owner, and denied her access to her own residence. Under the court's emergency order, he had exactly 1 hour to leave the property. The blonde woman suddenly stepped forward. Ethan, you told me this house was yours. Ethan couldn't answer. His silence said everything. She looked around the mansion, realizing the luxurious life she had been promised had been built on lies. Furious, she grabbed her designer handbag and stormed toward the driveway. You lied to me about everything, she shouted before driving away without looking back. Inside the house, movers hired by the court began carefully placing Olivia's belongings back where they belonged. Ethan stood helplessly in the middle of the living room, watching strangers carry his own suitcases toward the front door. His expensive watches, tailored suits, golf clubs, and electronics were neatly packed into boxes marked personal property. Every minute that passed made the reality harder to deny. As the final box was carried outside, Ethan turned toward Olivia with tears in his eyes. "Please, don't do this. We can fix everything." Olivia looked at the man she had once trusted with her future and quietly replied, "You didn't just lock me out of this house, Ethan. You locked yourself out of our marriage the moment you believed I had nothing left." Without another word, she accepted the house keys from the deputy and walked through her own front door, leaving Ethan standing outside the gates of a home he would never enter again. For the first time in weeks, the mansion felt peaceful again. Olivia walked slowly through every room, touching the walls her parents had chosen years ago. It was never about the building itself. It was about the memories it protected. Her mother's favorite reading chair still sat beside the living room window exactly where it had always been. Olivia gently placed her hand on it and closed her eyes, remembering the last conversation they had shared. Her mother had smiled and quietly said, "Never let anyone convince you that kindness means weakness." At the time, Olivia hadn't fully understood those words. Now they carried a meaning she would never forget. Meanwhile, Ethan's life was falling apart faster than he could imagine. News of the illegal eviction spread through his company after court records became public. His employer immediately suspended him while an internal ethics investigation began. Clients who had trusted him with expensive contracts started pulling their business away. Even worse, several banks refused to approve his pending loan applications after discovering the legal dispute. The man who had once acted untouchable suddenly couldn't even rent a small apartment without explaining why he had been removed from a mansion he claimed was his. A week later, Ethan appeared outside the front gate once again. This time there were no expensive suits, no confident smile, and no luxury car. He looked exhausted. Dark circles surrounded his eyes as he quietly pressed the intercom. "Olivia, please. Just 5 minutes." She watched him through the security camera for several seconds before opening the gate, but only enough for him to stand outside the front steps. "I've lost everything," he whispered. "My job, my reputation, everyone left me." Even she walked away. Olivia remained calm. "You didn't lose everything today, Ethan." He looked at her with confused eyes. "You lost everything the day you decided betrayal was easier than honesty." He lowered his head. "I know I don't deserve forgiveness." "No," Olivia replied softly. "You don't." She handed him a sealed envelope. Inside were the finalized divorce paper. There was also one short handwritten note. "You changed the locks on my house. Today, I changed the locks on my future." Without another word, Olivia closed the front door, leaving Ethan standing alone with the only thing he had left, the consequences of his own choices. 6 months later, Olivia Bennet stood on the balcony of the mansion, watching hundreds of guests gather on the perfectly landscaped lawn below. But this time, it wasn't for a family celebration or a lavish party. The Bennet estate had been transformed into the headquarters of the Bennet Women's Recovery Foundation, a non-profit organization dedicated to helping women rebuild their lives after financial betrayal, domestic abuse, and emotional manipulation. What had once been the place where Olivia experienced the deepest heartbreak of her life had become a place where hundreds of women found hope. As she prepared to deliver the opening speech, her phone vibrated. It was a message from Daniel Harrison. "There's someone outside asking to see you one last time." Olivia walked toward the front gate and immediately recognized Ethan. He looked nothing like the confident man who had thrown her out only months earlier. His expensive suits had been replaced by a simple jacket. His luxury car was gone. His pride had disappeared. He held a small cardboard box in his hands. "I don't expect forgiveness," he said quietly. "I just wanted to return these." Inside the box were their old wedding photographs, the engagement ring box, and every handwritten letter Olivia had ever given him during their marriage. "I should have valued these more than money," he whispered. Olivia looked through the box for a moment before closing it gently. "You spent years believing this house made you successful," she said calmly. "But it was never the mansion. It was the people inside it. The moment you betrayed them, you lost everything that truly mattered." Tears filled Ethan's eyes. "I'm sorry." Olivia gave him a kind but distant smile. "I believe you are. But some apologies come after the damage is already done." She handed the box back to him. "Keep these. They'll remind you that trust is far more valuable than any fortune." Without anger, without hatred, and without looking back, Olivia returned to the stage where hundreds of women welcomed her with applause. Standing behind the podium, she looked across the crowd and smiled. "A few months ago," she began, "someone tried to convince me that they could take my home, my future, and my confidence. What I learned is that no one can steal your future unless you give them permission. The greatest revenge isn't making someone suffer. It's building a life so full of peace, purpose, and happiness that their betrayal no longer controls your story." The audience rose to its feet in a standing ovation. As cameras flashed and applause filled the air, Olivia looked up at the sky and quietly whispered, "Mom, we protected everything you built." At that moment, she realized her greatest victory had never been getting the mansion back. It was becoming the woman her mother always believed she could be. Because the strongest people don't win by destroying those who hurt them. They win by refusing to let betrayal define the rest of their lives.